The ground shook again. Taman felt the vibration through his feet as another section of their underground city collapsed. Above them, the Devourers were eating everything. They had been eating for 3 days now. How many are left? Taman asked So Young. She sat at her communication station, her green fingers moving across the controls. Her plant-like skin looked pale and dry. All the Valari looked sick now. They needed sunlight and fresh air, but there was none left on the surface. Maybe 200 of us, So Young said. Her voice was quiet and sad. The western tunnels are gone. The Devourers broke through an hour ago. Taman closed his eyes and tried to reach out with his mind. All Valari could speak to each other with thoughts, but now he felt mostly silence. Where once thousands of minds had shared their world, now only a few weak voices remained. The Valari had lived on Lumina Prime for 10,000 years. They were peaceful people who grew their cities like gardens. Their buildings were made of living trees, and their technology worked with nature instead of against it. They had never fought a war. They had never even built weapons. Then the Devourers came. The first ships appeared in their sky 5 days ago. They looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. The Valari tried to talk to them, tried to welcome them as they had welcomed all visitors to their world. But the Devourers did not want to talk. They wanted to eat. The creatures poured from their ships like a black flood. They ate the forests first, then the cities, then the people who could not run fast enough. The Devourers consumed everything living, turning it into more of themselves. Each thing they ate made them stronger and hungrier. Sir, So Young said, the shields are failing. We have maybe 6 hours left. Taman looked around the small room. It was all that remained of their great library, the center of Valari learning. Now it held their last survivors. Families huddled together in the corners. Children cried for food they did not have. The old ones sat quietly preparing to die. Can we reach any of the other worlds? Taman asked. The Valari had friends among the stars. Surely someone would help them. So Young shook her head. The Corvin system is too far. The Peaceful Alliance cannot get here in time. No one can get here in time. Another shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the walls they could hear the sound of the Devourers digging. It sounded like metal teeth grinding through stone. There is one thing, So Young said slowly. I could send a message on all frequencies. Someone might hear it. Do it, Tamin said. But sir, if I broadcast on all channels, anyone might answer. Even dangerous species. Even the ones the other civilizations fear. Tamin thought about this. The galaxy was full of different kinds of people. Most were peaceful like the Valari. But some were not. Some were warriors and hunters. Some solved problems with violence instead of words. The ground shook harder. A crack appeared in the wall. Through it, they could see a metal claw scraping at the stone. Send the message, Taman said. Death by dangerous friends is better than death by these monsters. So Young's fingers danced over her controls. She opened every communication channel their equipment could reach. Her message went out in all directions, carrying across the dark spaces between stars. This is Lumina Prime, she said into the transmitter. We are the Valari. We are dying. Creatures called Devourers are eating our world. We have no weapons. We have no defenses. We are a peaceful people and we do not know how to fight. Please help us. Anyone who can hear this, please help us. We do not want to die. She sent their location with the message. She sent pictures of their world before the Devourers came. She sent recordings of their music and their poetry. If they were going to die, at least someone would know they had existed. The message traveled through space at the speed of light. It passed dead worlds and living ones. It passed through busy trade routes and empty systems. Most places it went, no one was listening, but in a few places someone heard. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, computers recorded the message. In the trading posts of the merchant fleets, communication officers noted another distress call from another dying world. Most deleted it or filed it away. The galaxy was big, and bad things happened to good people every day. But in one small research ship near the edge of known space, Captain Jin Ho heard the message and made a choice that would change everything. And in a place the galaxy had forgotten, in a system marked with warning beacons and danger signs, in a world that had been cut off from the rest of civilization for hundreds of years, other ears heard the call. Meanwhile, on Lumina Prime, the shields finally failed. The Devourers burst into the underground chamber like water through a broken dam. Taman saw them clearly for the first time. They were worse than the pictures had shown. Each one was different, but all were horrible. Some walked on legs stolen from animals they had eaten. Others flew on wings taken from birds. Their bodies were metal and flesh mixed together in ways that should not exist. "Run!" Taemin shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The Valari pressed together in the center of the room. Children hid behind their parents. The old ones stood in front, ready to die first to buy time for the young. So Young stayed at her communication station. "Still broadcasting," she said. Her voice was calm even as the monsters came closer. "Still sending the message. Maybe someone will hear. Maybe someone will remember us." The first devourer reached them. It raised a claw that had once belonged to some great beast. Taemin closed his eyes and reached out with his mind one last time, trying to touch any other consciousness in the universe. "Help us," he thought. "Please, someone help us." In the darkness of space, his mental cry joined So Young's radio message. Together they traveled to places the Valari had never imagined, carrying the desperate hope of a dying people. Someone was listening. Someone was coming. But would they arrive in time? And would they be friend or foe? The claw came down and everything went black. Hyunwoo was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm sounded. He worked at Station Omega 7, one of the listening posts that watched the edge of civilized space. Most days were quiet. Ships came and went. Traders talked to each other. Pirates sometimes caused trouble. Nothing exciting ever happened. But today was different. His computer screen lit up with red warning symbols. A distress call was coming in from the restricted zone. Hyunwoo nearly choked on his coffee. No one was supposed to be in the restricted zone. He played the message. A female voice spoke in the common galactic language, but her accent was strange. She talked about creatures called devourers eating her world. She said her people were dying and needed help. Hyunwoo checked the coordinates. His blood went cold. The message was coming from very close to the quarantine zone, very close to the place where the humans lived. He ran to find his boss. Mi-young was in her office, reading reports about grain shipments and fuel costs. She looked up when Hyunwoo burst through her door. "What is it?" she asked. "A distress call," Hyunwoo said. "From near the human zone." Mi-young's face went pale. She followed Hyunwoo to his station and listened to the message. When it finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Delete it," she said finally. "What?" Hyunwoo stared at her. "But they're asking for help." "Delete it," Mi-young said again. "We never heard it. It never happened. But people are dying." Mi-young grabbed Hyunwoo by the shoulders. "Do you know what humans are?" she asked. "Do you remember the stories?" Hyunwoo did remember. Every child in the galaxy learned about the humans. They were the nightmare species, the ones who turned their beautiful world into a poisoned wasteland. They had killed all the great animals on their planet just for fun. When they first came to space, they had tried to conquer everything they saw. The war had lasted 50 years. The humans fought against everyone: the Galactic Council, the Trade Federation, the Peaceful Alliance. They used weapons that other species would never dream of building. They destroyed entire worlds rather than surrender them. Finally, the galaxy had worked together to push the humans back to their home system. Great space stations were built around their solar system. Warning beacons were placed everywhere. Signs in every language said the same thing: danger. Quarantined species, do not enter. Do not contact. For 300 years, the humans had been trapped in their system. Most people thought they had probably killed each other by now. Everyone hoped they had. "If we answer this call," Mi-young said, "and if the humans hear it, they might come out. Do you want to be responsible for releasing the most dangerous species in the galaxy?" Hyunwoo looked at the message again. The woman sounded so scared, so hopeless. But what if they could help? Help? Mi-young laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Humans don't help. They conquer. They destroy. They take what they want and burn the rest. "Maybe they've changed," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Maybe they haven't. Are you willing to bet the galaxy on maybe?" Mi-young deleted the message from their computers. She sent orders to all the other listening posts. Any signals from that area were to be ignored. The Valari would have to face their monsters alone, but the message had already traveled farther than they knew. Captain Jin-ho was 2 days away from Station Omega 7 in his research ship, the Seeker. He was studying old space debris near the quarantine zone, looking for clues about what happened to long-dead civilizations. His communications officer picked up the Valari distress call before Mi-young could stop it. "Captain," the officer said, "we're receiving a distress signal. Jinho listened to the message. His science team gathered around him. Dr. Yoonji, his chief researcher, shook her head sadly. Another world dying, she said. It happens too often. The signal is weak, the communications officer said. It's coming from very far away. I don't think anyone else will hear it. Jinho studied the coordinates. They were in an empty part of space far from any major civilizations. No one would get there in time to help. The Valari would die alone. He made a decision that would change everything. Send the message again, he said, sir. The communications officer looked confused. Boost the signal and send it again. Use our most powerful transmitter. Make sure it reaches as far as possible. Dr. Yoonji grabbed his arm. Jinho, those coordinates are near the human quarantine zone. I know. If you broadcast that message with more power, they might hear it. Good. Good? Dr. Yoonji stared at him. Jinho, we're talking about humans. They're monsters. Jinho looked at the message again. He thought about the Valari woman scared and alone watching her people die. Maybe, he said, but maybe they're the only monsters big enough to fight other monsters. This is insane, Dr. Yoonji said. If the humans come out, they won't just save the Valari. They'll start conquering again. They'll bring war to the whole galaxy. The whole galaxy is already at war, Jinho said. We just pretend it isn't. Pirates raid colonies every day. Slave traders steal people from weak worlds. The strong prey on the weak, and we call it trade. At least humans are honest about what they are. You don't know what you're doing? Yes, I do. Jinho turned to his communications officer. Boost the signal. Send it toward the human system. If they're still alive in there, let them hear it. The officer looked scared, but he followed orders. The message traveled through space again, stronger this time. It passed through the warning beacons around the human system. It passed through the quarantine stations, empty now after so many years. And deep in the solar system where humanity waited, it was heard. On Earth, in underground bunkers built after the Great Wars, old computers came to life. Screens that had been dark for decades began to glow. Warning lights flashed in rooms where no one had walked for years. Admiral Dong-hyun was pulled from his sleep by an aide. He dressed quickly and hurried to the command center. The message was playing when he arrived. He listened to the woman's voice, speaking of death and monsters and the end of her world. When it finished, he played it again. How long since we've heard from the outside? He asked. 347 years, sir, his aide replied. Dong-hyun nodded slowly. 347 years since the galaxy had decided humanity was too dangerous to live among them. 347 years of isolation and silence. But now someone needed help. Someone was crying out in the darkness, and humans had always answered when someone called for help. That was what had made them dangerous in the first place. Admiral Dong-hyun stood in the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room had been built during the dark years after the war, when Earth was broken and bleeding. Now it hummed with activity for the first time in decades. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps, ship positions, and communication channels. Officers moved between workstations, their faces serious. Everyone knew this day would come eventually. They just hadn't expected it to come like this. Play the message again, Dong-hyun said. So Young's voice filled the room once more. She sounded so young, so scared. Her people were dying while she begged the universe for help. The Admiral had heard many distress calls during the war years, but this one was different. This one had traveled across 300 years of silence to reach them. Analysis? He asked his staff. The signal originated from a system called Lumina Prime, said Commander Park, his intelligence officer. Population approximately 50 million Valari. Plant-based species, peaceful civilization, no military capability. And these devourers? Unknown species. Based on the description, they appear to be some kind of consuming organism. They eat everything organic and use it to reproduce. How long ago was this message sent? 4 days, sir. At light speed, assuming they're still alive, we could reach them in 6 days. Dong-hyun closed his eyes. 6 days, the Valari might already be dead, but they might not be. Sir, Commander Park continued, I should point out that responding to this call would mean leaving the quarantine zone for the first time since the isolation accords. I'm aware of that. Commander, the door to the command center opened. Ari, the Secretary of Colonial Affairs, walked in with quick, angry steps. Behind her came Woo Jin, the Director of Space Operations. Admiral, Ari said. I heard about the message. Please tell me you're not considering what I think you're considering. People are dying, Ari. People die every day. That doesn't mean we should abandon everything we've built here. Dong-hyun turned to face her. Ari was young, born long after the war ended. She had grown up in the new Earth, the peaceful Earth, the Earth that had learned to control its violent nature. What have we built? He asked. Underground cities? Closed societies? A whole world living in shame? We built a civilization that doesn't solve every problem with violence, Ari said. We built a species that can live with itself. Do you want to throw that away? No one's throwing anything away, aren't you? If we leave this system, if we go back into the galaxy, we'll become what we were before. The other species will see us as invaders. They'll attack us. We'll have to fight back. And once the fighting starts, when does it end? Woojin stepped forward. It ends when people stop dying needlessly, he said. It ends when the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them. Pretty words, Ari said. But you know what happens when humans try to help. We destroy everything we touch. That's not true, Dong-hyun said quietly. We saved the Carillions from the plague wars. We stopped the Zirian Empire from enslaving the inner systems. We fought against every bully and tyrant in the galaxy, and we killed billions doing it. Yes, we did. The Admiral's voice was heavy. We killed billions. We burned worlds. We turned space into a battlefield. But we also saved trillions. We freed entire species from slavery. We stopped genocides. We stood between the innocent and those who would hurt them. Ari shook her head. The galaxy quarantined us because we were dangerous, not because we were heroic. They quarantined us because we scared them, Woojin said. We were willing to do things they wouldn't do. We were willing to pay prices they wouldn't pay. We were willing to get our hands dirty so theirs could stay clean. And now? Ari asked. Now we're supposed to go back to being the galaxy's attack dogs? Dong-hyun walked to the main screen. It showed a tactical display of their solar system. Around the edges were the old quarantine beacons, still broadcasting their warnings after all these years. We've had 3 centuries to think about what we are, he said. 3 centuries to decide what kind of species we want to be. Some of us chose to hide, some chose to forget, but I think most of us chose to become better. He touched a control and the display changed. Now it showed Earth itself, green and blue and beautiful again. The poisoned lands had healed. The dead cities had been rebuilt. The wars were over. We're not the same humans who left Earth 400 years ago, Dong-hyun continued. We're not even the same humans who came back broken and bitter. We've learned. We've grown. We've become something new. But we're still human, Woojin added. And humans protect those who can't protect themselves. Ari looked around the room. She saw officers checking weapon systems and ship readiness reports. She saw the excitement in their eyes, the eagerness for action after so many years of peace. You want this, she said. You want to go back to war? No, Dong-hyun said. I've seen enough war for 10 lifetimes. But I also can't ignore a cry for help, not when we have the power to answer it. And if the galaxy sees us as invaders, if they attack us, then we'll deal with that problem when it comes. Ari was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. I can't stop you, can I? The decision is made, Dong-hyun said. But I need to know our people are united. Will you support this? Ari looked at the star maps, at the distant point of light that marked the Villari system. Somewhere out there, people were dying while politicians debated. God help us all, she said. Yes, I'll support it. Dong-hyun nodded and turned to his staff. Begin Operation Homecoming, he said. I want the fleet ready in 12 hours. Which ships, sir? Asked Commander Park. All of them. The command center erupted in activity. Officers ran to their stations. Communication channels opened to hidden bases across the solar system. On Mars, in the asteroid belt, on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, lights came on in facilities that had waited centuries for this moment. The human fleet was waking up. In shipyards scattered throughout the system, massive vessels began their startup sequences. The indomitable humanity's flagship had been in mothballs for 200 years. Now her reactors came online, her weapons powered up, her crew quarters filled with volunteers. Smaller ships joined her, destroyers and cruisers, carriers and support vessels. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering, built during the years when war was all they knew. They had been retired when peace came, but they had been maintained waiting. Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as she left Earth orbit for the first time in centuries. Through the view screen, he could see the quarantine beacons ahead, ancient warning signs telling the universe to stay away from humanity. "Orders, sir?" asked his helmsman. Dong-hyun thought about the Valari woman's voice, desperate and afraid. He thought about the children hiding in underground shelters while monsters ate their world. "Take us through the beacons," he said. "It's time to go home." The fleet passed through the warning zone and into open space. Behind them, Earth grew smaller. Ahead lay the unknown. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and the galaxy was about to remember why they had been so afraid. Taman woke up in darkness. His head hurt and his mouth tasted like metal and dust. He tried to remember where he was, then it all came back. The devourers, the failed shields, the claws coming down. But he was alive. Somehow he was alive. He sat up carefully. Around him other Valari were stirring. Some were hurt, but most seemed unharmed. They were in the same underground chamber, but something was different. The air felt cleaner. The ground wasn't shaking anymore. "Taemin?" So Young's voice came from across the room. She was still at her communication station, but now strange lights blinked on her equipment. "I'm here," he said. "What happened?" "Where are the devourers?" "I don't know. They just stopped. One moment they were about to kill us, the next they turned and ran back to the surface." Taemin stood up slowly. His telepathic senses, weak from days of fear and hunger, began to work again. He could feel the other survivors around him, but he could also feel something else, powerful minds approaching from above. "So Young," he said urgently. "Are you still receiving signals?" She checked her instruments. "Yes, there are ships coming. Big ships. I've never seen energy signatures like these. Can you identify them?" "No, they don't match any species in our database." "But Taemin, there are hundreds of them." High above Lumina Prime, space was full of fire. The human fleet had arrived 6 hours ago to find the planet under attack. The devourer swarms covered the surface like a disease, their bioships forming a dark cloud around the dying world. Admiral Dong-hyun watched the battle from the bridge of the Indomitable. His tactical display showed red dots everywhere. Thousands of enemy vessels, from small fighters to massive carrier creatures. "Target analysis?" he asked. "Biological ships, sir," reported his weapons officer. "They appear to be grown rather than built. Heavy armor, plasma weapons, no shields. They're tough but not impossible to kill. Fighter status? All squadrons launched and engaging. Squadron leader Yoo-jin reports good hunting." Dong-hyun nodded. Yoo-jin was one of their best pilots. A young woman who had trained for war her whole life but never expected to see it. Now she was leading her fighters against monsters from another world. In space above the planet, Yoo-jin's squadron tore through a formation of devourer fighters. The enemy ships were fast and dangerous, but they fought like animals. No tactics, no coordination, just hunger and rage. The human pilots fought differently. They moved like dancers, like predators, like creatures born for this moment. Their ships were works of art and death, beautiful and terrible at the same time. "Falcon leader to all units." Yoo-jin spoke into her radio. "Concentrate fire on the big ones. Ignore the small fry unless they get in your way." Her pilots responded with eager voices. They had trained for centuries, studying the old battles, learning from their grandfathers' wars. Now they finally had a chance to prove themselves. A massive devourer bioship, easily a kilometer long, turned toward Yoo-jin's squadron. Its hull was covered in weapon ports that looked like infected wounds. It began firing streams of corrosive plasma. "My turn," Yoo-jin said. She rolled her fighter and dove toward the creature's center, her missile locks engaged, painting targets across the bioship's surface. Fox 3, Fox 3. Her missiles struck the creature's hull and disappeared inside, seeking vital organs. A moment later, the bioship convulsed and split open, spilling smaller creatures into the void. "Good kill, Falcon leader," came the voice from the Indomitable. "Move to Grid 7 and assist the Marines." On the planet's surface, Colonel Bora led the ground assault. Her Marines had landed in drop pods, punching through the devourer swarms like falling hammers. Now they were fighting their way through the ruins of Valari cities looking for survivors. The devourers on the ground were even worse than the spaceborne ones. They had fed on the planet's life, growing fat and strange. Some had multiple heads taken from different animals. Others had too many arms or legs or eyes. All of them were hungry for more, but the human Marines were ready for them. "Contact front," shouted Sergeant Hana as a pack of devourers rounded a corner. The creatures looked like metal spiders wearing the faces of dead animals. The Marines opened fire. Their weapons spoke with voices of thunder, sending streams of depleted uranium into the enemy. The Devourers screamed and charged, but they died before they could reach human lines. Clear, Hana called. Keep moving. The survivors are 2 clicks north. Colonel Bora monitored the battle through her tactical display. Her Marines were pushing forward steadily, leaving trails of dead Devourers behind them. These weren't soldiers, they were exterminators. And the Devourers were just another infestation to be cleaned up. But the strangest part of the battle was happening underground. The surviving Volari could feel the human minds as they fought. Through their telepathic abilities, they experienced the emotions of their rescuers, and what they felt shocked them. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't angry. They were happy. I don't understand, whispered one of the Volari children. The fighting minds above us. They enjoy this. Timin felt it too. The humans fought with a joy that was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. They took pleasure in the battle, not because they loved killing, but because they loved protecting. Each dead devourer was one less threat to innocent life. They're not monsters, So Young said quietly. They're gardeners. They're pulling weeds. Above them, the battle was ending. Captain Sun Ho of the assault carrier Vengeance watched his screens as the last Devourer bioships died. The enemy had fought bravely but stupidly. They had no concept of tactics beyond eat everything. Against humans, that wasn't enough. All enemy vessels destroyed, reported his tactical officer. Planetary surface is secure. Casualties? Light. We lost 3 fighters and had some minor damage to the cruiser Defiant. No marine casualties reported, Sun Ho nodded. 3 dead out of a fleet of thousands. Against an enemy that had consumed an entire planet, those were impossibly good odds. But then again, they were human odds. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Dong Hyun received the final reports. The Devourer swarms were extinct. Lumina Prime was free. The Volari were safe. Sir, said his communications officer, we're receiving a message from the planet. The survivors want to thank us. Put them through. Taemin's voice filled the bridge. He spoke in careful galactic standard, his words formal but emotional. Unknown ships, this is Taemin of the Volari. We do not know who you are, but you have saved our lives and our world. We are grateful beyond words. Please land your ships. Let us thank you properly. Dong Hyun smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in days. This is Admiral Dong Hyun of the Terran Fleet, he replied. We received your distress call. We're glad we could help. There was a long silence from the planet. Then Taemin's voice came back very quiet. Terran, you are humans? Yes, another pause. But you came to help us. Yes, we heard stories about your people. We heard you were dangerous. Admiral Dong Hyun looked out at the debris field that had once been the Devourer fleet. He thought about his Marines on the surface, cleaning up the last pockets of resistance. He thought about his pilots already preparing for the next mission. We are dangerous, he said. But we're dangerous to those who hurt the innocent. We're dangerous to monsters and bullies and anyone who thinks might makes right. And to us? To you, we're just neighbors who heard you calling for help. Down on the planet, Taemin felt tears on his face. Around him, the other Volari were crying too. They had been saved by the most feared species in the galaxy, and their rescuers had asked for nothing in return. But across the galaxy, other powers were hearing about what had happened at Lumina Prime, and they were afraid. The humans were back. The most dangerous species in known space had broken their quarantine, and they were helping people somehow. That was the most terrifying news of all. 3 days after the battle, Taemin stood in what had once been his people's greatest city. The Devourers had eaten most of it, leaving behind only strange metal structures and empty spaces. But human engineers were already working to help rebuild. Admiral Dong Hyun walked beside him through the ruins. The human leader looked tired but satisfied. His soldiers worked nearby, clearing debris and setting up temporary shelters for the Volari survivors. Your people move fast, Taemin said, watching a group of Marines assemble a medical station. We've had practice, Dong Hyun replied. During the old wars, we had to rebuild cities every few months. The old wars, Taemin repeated. We heard stories about those. About what humans did to the galaxy. Dong Hyun stopped walking. What did you hear? Taemin was quiet for a moment. Through his telepathic abilities, he could sense the Admiral's emotions. Sadness, regret, but also determination. We heard that humans were violent. That you conquered worlds and enslaved species. That you turned space into a battlefield. All true. We heard that you were so dangerous the entire galaxy worked together to lock you away. Also true. Taemin looked at the human soldiers helping his people. They were gentle with the Valari children, patient with the elderly, careful not to frighten anyone with their weapons or their size. But you came to help us anyway. Yes. Why? Dong-hyun watched his Marines distribute food to hungry Valari families. Because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's why we were dangerous before, and it's why we're dangerous now. Across the galaxy, the news was spreading. In the Great Council chambers on Nexus Prime, emergency sessions were being called. The Galactic Council hadn't met in full session for 50 years. But now representatives from every major species were arriving on emergency transport. Councillor Vex of the Hegemony stood before the assembly, his forearms gesturing angrily. "The quarantine has been broken," he declared. "The humans have returned to space." Fear rippled through the chamber. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves agreeing on one thing. Humanity was a threat to all of them. "How many ships?" asked Councillor Zara of the Trade Federation. "Intelligence reports indicate at least 500 vessels," Vex replied. "All heavily armed, all of human design." "Impossible," said Councillor Keth of the Scientific Union. "Humans have been quarantined for 3 centuries. Their technology should be obsolete." "Their technology was never obsolete," Vex said grimly. "It was just too dangerous for civilized species to use." The assembly erupted in worried voices. Some called for immediate military action. Others suggested negotiation. A few wondered if humanity could be contained again. But on the edge of the galaxy, Captain Jin Ho watched the debates through intercepted communications. His small research ship, the Seeker, was still near the quarantine zone. Observing what happened next, Dr. Yunji sat beside him, studying the tactical reports from Lumina Prime. "They completely destroyed the Devourer swarms," she said with amazement. "A species that had consumed entire worlds, and the humans wiped them out in 6 hours. With minimal casualties," Jin Ho added. 3 fighters lost. No ground forces killed. Either humans have become impossibly good at war or they were always this good and everyone else was just lucky the humans chose to hold back. Jin Ho nodded thoughtfully. The galaxy spent 3 centuries telling itself that humans were primitive savages who won through luck and numbers. But what if we were wrong? What if they were always more advanced than us and we just couldn't admit it? On Lumina Prime, Admiral Dong-hyun received word of the galaxy's reaction. His communications officer brought him reports from across known space. "The major powers are mobilizing their fleets," the officer reported. "The hegemony has declared a state of emergency. The Trade Federation is recalling all ships to defensive positions. Are they planning to attack us?" "Unknown, sir. But they're definitely afraid of us," Dong-hyun sighed. He had hoped for a different reaction, but he wasn't surprised. Fear had always been humanity's greatest enemy. "Any word from the smaller species?" "Actually, yes, sir. We've received messages from 17 different civilizations, all expressing gratitude for what we did here. Several are asking if we might help them with their own problems." "What kind of problems?" "Pirates, slavers, corrupt governments." "The usual things," Dong-hyun considered this. The galaxy's major powers feared humanity's return, but the minor species, the ones who suffered under the current system, were hopeful. "Sir," the communications officer continued, "the Valari are ready to make their broadcast." Dong-hyun nodded. Taemin had requested access to the galactic communication networks. He wanted to tell the universe what had really happened at Lumina Prime. They gathered in the rebuilt communication center. Taemin sat before the transmitter with So Young at his side. Behind them stood other Valari survivors, living proof of what human intervention could accomplish. "This is Taemin of Lumina Prime," he began. 3 days ago, my people were dying. Creatures called Devourers were eating our world. We sent a desperate message into space hoping someone would hear us. His voice was steady, but Dong-hyun could see the emotion in his plant-like features. "The humans heard us. The same species your governments told us to fear came to our rescue. They asked for nothing. They demanded no payment. They simply came because we needed help. Across the galaxy, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. In council chambers and trading posts, in military headquarters and civilian homes, people heard the Valari's testimony. Yes, Humans are dangerous, Taman continued. They are very dangerous, but they are dangerous to evil, not to innocence. They are dangerous to those who prey on the weak. They are dangerous to monsters like the Devourers. So Young stepped forward. I was the one who sent the original distress call. I broadcasted on all frequencies, hoping anyone would hear us. The major civilizations ignored us. They filed our message away and forgot about us. But the humans came. On his research ship, Captain Jin Ho watched the broadcast with growing interest. The Valari were not just thanking their rescuers. They were challenging the galaxy's preconceptions about humanity. The humans could have demanded payment, Taemin said. They could have claimed our world as a prize. They could have enslaved us. Instead, they helped us rebuild. They treated us as equals. They asked only that we remember their kindness. Admiral Dong-hyun stepped into view of the camera. Across the galaxy, beings saw a human face for the first time in centuries. He looked older than the ancient war images, more tired but also more peaceful. My name is Admiral Dong-hyun, he said. I speak for the human fleet and the people of Earth. We know what you think of us. We know why you quarantined us. You weren't wrong. We are dangerous. In council chambers across the galaxy, military leaders leaned forward to listen. We are dangerous to those who commit genocide. We are dangerous to those who enslave the innocent. We are dangerous to those who believe might makes right. If you fall into any of those categories, then yes, you should fear us. He paused, looking directly into the camera. But if you are trying to build something good in this galaxy, if you are protecting the weak instead of preying on them, if you believe that civilization means helping each other instead of conquering each other, then we are not your enemies. We are your allies. The broadcast ended, but its effects rippled across known space for hours. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Some members called for immediate war against humanity. Others suggested careful diplomacy. A few wondered if humans might actually help solve some of the galaxy's problems. But in the outer systems, on colonies that suffered from pirate raids and government corruption, the reaction was different. They began sending their own messages toward the human fleet. Help us, they said. We have problems too. Admiral Dong-hyun read the messages as they came in. Dozens of worlds asking for help. Hundreds of species reaching out to the galaxy's most feared civilization. What do we do? Asked Commander Park. Dong-hyun looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were suffering. Pirates were raiding defenseless colonies. Corrupt officials were stealing from their own people. Slavers were preying on the weak. For 3 centuries, humanity had stayed home and tried to forget about the galaxy's problems. They had told themselves it wasn't their responsibility anymore, but a cry for help had changed everything. We do what we've always done, Dong-hyun said. We answer when people call for help. In the depths of space, the human fleet began to move. Not toward Earth, but deeper into the galaxy. There was work to be done. Behind them, on Lumina Prime, the Valari watched their saviors depart. Taemin stood with So Young in their rebuilt city, looking up at the stars. Do you think they'll be all right? So Young asked. The humans? Taemin smiled. I think the galaxy has forgotten what humans really are. They're not conquerors. They're gardeners. And this galaxy has a lot of weeds that need pulling. Above them, the last human ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying hope to desperate worlds and fear to those who deserved it. The humans had returned to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again.